Hello and welcome. My name is César Monzant, and it's a pleasure to be sharing this masterclass with you. I also want to say that I genuinely value your presence here, and my hope is that this exceeds every expectation you may have right now. We all have an inner narrator called the inner dialogue. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that it always makes recommendations, suggestions, and statements? Millions of people trapped in difficult situations rarely stop to question the narrative of their inner dialogue. For example, they almost never ask themselves, is my inner dialogue guiding me or pulling me away from my goals? Obviously, the inner dialogue has a significant impact when we face adversity. When the inner dialogue pulls people away from their goals, certain negative effects become clear. There is an onset of anxiety and stress, conditions that tend to be associated with a feeling of losing control. And despite the effort and dedication, a cycle of repeated negative outcomes sets in, which are perceived as obstacles that are hard to overcome. In this first step, we need to ask ourselves an essential question. Is my inner dialogue truly helping me or pulling me away from my goals? As you reflect on your answer, if you notice that, despite your effort and following your own recommendations and suggestions, the results aren't what you expected, the conclusion is clear. Your inner dialogue is pulling you away from your goals. And that is exactly what needs to change. That is why we need to move on to the second step. In this second step, two key questions arise. The first is, when is my inner dialogue telling the truth? And when is it not? And the second is, what other factors are affecting me? The answers to these two questions gave rise to my interpretive model, which I called the theory of dominant frequency polarity. It is a model built on personal observations and analysis, with contributions from neuroscience and the interpretation of the quantum field as a space that holds outcomes and possibilities. In the 19th century, with the advancement of science, it was discovered that neurons operate through electrical impulses and that the brain generates electromagnetic fields. That discovery, the fact that the brain runs on electricity, leads me to ask you something. What if your brain doesn't just think, but also attracts? This idea that the human brain acts like a magnet did not originate in modern neuroscience. Its origin traces back much further than most people think. Paracelsus, a Swiss physician and alchemist born in 1493, was one of the first to propose that the human body was permeated by invisible forces similar to magnetism. According to him, the brain and nervous system interacted with natural energies of the universe. Approximately 200 years later, Franz Anton Mesmer, a German physician who lived from 1734 to 1815, developed the concept of animal magnetism, proposing that the brain functioned as a magnetic center capable of attracting and repelling other bodies. His practices laid the groundwork for hypnosis. Later, other physicians and thinkers continued developing these ideas, suggesting that the brain could emit and receive influences, and that a kind of current might connect the minds of different people. In short, the first to claim that the human being acts like a magnet were Paracelsus in the 16th century and Franz Anton Mesmer in the 18th century. Modern science has not confirmed the idea in a literal sense, but it does recognize that the brain operates through electricity and electromagnetic fields. With that brief introduction behind us, let's move on to present the theory of dominant frequency polarity, in which it is established that every mental, intentional, emotional, or feeling-based state generates a frequency with a specific polarity. So, the intention to help others, according to our interpretive model, has a dominant frequency with negative polarity. It is important to note that this frequency is considered dominant only when it arises naturally and spontaneously, when there is a deep sense of alignment with a genuine desire to help others, and when it is not manufactured or forced, it is authentic. The fact that frequencies have a specific polarity, positive or negative, gives meaning and answers to this. The law of opposites establishes that everything has a counterpart, and in this context, what is not being attracted is being repelled. If the dominant frequency generated by the intention to help others has a negative polarity, that frequency will attract positive outcomes, since, according to the law of electrical charges, opposite poles attract. Now, I think this is the right moment to look at an example. In this journey, we're going to trace the story of a television host who, as a little girl, grew up in extreme poverty in the rural south of Mississippi with barely any resources or stability. But as she witnessed the suffering around her, she felt a deep need to give a voice to those who had none, and she made herself a promise that when she had a platform, she would use it to change lives. In her early years, she faced abuse, discrimination, and setbacks in television, but her intention and her drive to keep that promise never wavered. And so, she became the most influential television host in history, spending 25 years filling the homes of millions of people around the world. With the creation of the Oprah Winfrey Foundation, dedicated to providing scholarships and education to vulnerable youth, she kept her promise. After looking at an intention associated with positive outcomes, here we have the opposite case, the intention to make money. Within our conceptual framework, this represents the opposite of the intention to help others. This intention arises naturally and spontaneously, and there is a deep sense of alignment with a genuine desire to get good results. Most people mistakenly assume it is a frequency that attracts positive outcomes. The problem is that this intention manifests as a deeply ego-driven mental state. Seeking money is thinking about yourself, while helping others is focusing on the well-being of others. This desire to make money generates a positive polarity, and if the dominant frequency has a positive polarity, that polarity will repel positive outcomes, since, according to the law of electrical charges, like poles repel. Seen from another angle with the same result, when the frequency polarity is positive, the outcome is not what you hoped for, because an attraction occurs toward the negative outcome. Keep in mind that no law can be broken, and the law of electrical charges establishes that opposite poles attract. This principle explains why, at times, negative outcomes manifest despite efforts directed toward our goals. The key to changing those outcomes lies in identifying the polarity of the dominant frequency we are emitting. On the other hand, there are emotions that generate frequencies with negative polarity, such as love, forgiveness, gratitude, and compassion, among others, which, according to our model, are associated with positive outcomes. On the contrary, emotions that generate positive polarity are associated with negative outcomes. Some of these are hate, resentment, ingratitude, and envy, among others. Likewise, there are feelings that generate frequencies with negative polarity, such as satisfaction, fulfillment, joy, inner well-being, and harmony, among others. Conversely, there are feelings that generate positive polarity, such as helplessness, chronic insecurity, jealousy, and distrust, among many others. We've already seen how emotions and feelings carry a specific frequency and polarity. Great. But now comes the part I find most exciting, because feeling something is one thing, and what you do with it is a whole different story. Look, appropriate behavior generates a frequency with negative polarity. We already know that, right? In our model, negative attracts the good stuff. But inappropriate behavior, that's positive polarity. And positive polarity, as we've made clear, repels the good and draws in the bad. Simple as that. Now, this sounds great in theory, but I want you to see it in action. We're going to dive into a scene from Young Sheldon, where things keep escalating, and you'll see, step by step, how the polarity shifts.
What's going on?
What's going on is people are talking about my brother behind my back instead of saying it to my face.
What just happened? Missy finds out people have been talking about her brother behind his back. That is gossip. Plain and simple. Gossip is one of the most common behaviors out there, and one of the most toxic. Talking about someone when they can't defend themselves generates positive polarity, meaning it pushes away good outcomes, period. Now notice what Missy says. Instead of saying it to my face, she's asking for direct, upfront communication. That is appropriate behavior, negative polarity. The thing is, let's see what happens next.
I'll say it to your face. Your brother's going to hell.
No, he's not. Primarily because hell isn't real.
Did you catch that? Missy asked people to say things to her face, and they do, but not with honesty. They drop a verdict on her. Your brother is going to hell. That's not an opinion anymore. That's a condemnation. Using your beliefs to attack someone, that's inappropriate behavior, positive polarity. And notice how the conflict is already starting to heat up. It's about to get worse.
My mom said they should kick your whole family out of the church.
Look at how this is escalating. It's not just a personal judgment anymore. Now they want to kick the whole family out of the church. Push them out. Cut them off from the community. Using exclusion as punishment is deeply harmful behavior. Deciding that someone doesn't deserve to belong because they think differently, that generates positive polarity. And it doesn't just affect you. It creates an environment where the only thing that grows is conflict. And pay attention to this. The one saying it is a child. My mom said, "This kid is repeating something he learned at home. Inappropriate behaviors get copied. They're passed down. And that should concern all of us." But there's a detail I don't want you to miss. Sheldon responds, "No, he won't. Mainly because hell isn't real." What did Sheldon do? He responded with logic. No insults, no yelling. He just stated his point. That's appropriate behavior, negative polarity. The problem is that nobody listened.
How about I kick your ass?
I'd like to see you try. How about I help her?
And this is where it goes off the rails. Missy threatens to hit her, the other person dares her, and someone else jumps in. How about I help her? This has completely gotten out of hand. But look, let's be fair. Missy had every right to be upset. People talked trash about her brother, judged him, wanted to throw her family out. Her urge to protect him is valid. That's a negative polarity. But the problem isn't what you feel. The problem is what you do with it. When Missy goes from anger to a physical threat, she turns a valid feeling into inappropriate behavior, and right there, the polarity flips from negative to positive. And this is the trap we all fall into, believing that because my intentions are good, what I'm doing must be fine too. But no, it doesn't always work that way.
How about I go get Pastor Ron?
Did you hear that? Right in the middle of the chaos, someone says, "How about I go get Pastor Ron?" Surrounded by threats, insults, total escalation, one person kept a cool head and offered something different: mediation. That's appropriate behavior, negative polarity. It attracts positive outcomes. Did anyone listen? No, nobody listened. But the behavior is still the right one. And this is key. Whether a behavior is appropriate has nothing to do with whether others recognize it. The polarity of your frequency isn't decided by other people. It's decided by you.
Say one more thing about my family and see what happens.
Y'all are white trash.
Whoa, what's going on here?
And here we hit rock bottom. Missy warns, "Say one more thing and see what happens." And the response is a direct insult. "Y'all are white trash." No filter, just like that. Look at the whole chain. Gossip, judgment, exclusion, threats, and finally, an insult designed to destroy. All of it inappropriate, all of it positive polarity. And the result was exactly what the law of charges tells us. The worst possible outcomes were pulled right in. Nobody won. Not the ones doing the judging, not Missy, not Sheldon. When everyone is operating from inappropriate behavior, everyone attracts negative outcomes. It's a perfect equation, perfectly destructive. So, what does this scene leave us with? First, inappropriate behaviors escalate. Gossip becomes judgment. Judgment becomes exclusion. Exclusion becomes a threat. A threat becomes an insult. And every step piles on more positive polarity, more pull toward the bad. Second, your feeling being valid doesn't justify any reaction. Missy had every right to be furious, but the way she acted shifted her polarity. And third, there is always a choice. There is always someone in the room who offers a different path. In this case, it was the one who said, "I'm going to get Pastor Ron." You can always be that person, the one who chooses right, even when everything around them is going wrong. So the next time you're in the middle of a conflict, before you react, stop for a second and ask yourself, what I'm about to do, what polarity is it going to generate? You choose your polarity. You choose your outcomes. So far in this second step, we have only addressed the second question, showing some factors that could be affecting us. Let's keep going, now answering the first question. When does our inner dialogue reflect the truth, and when does it not? In other words, what are the criteria for determining the truthfulness of our inner dialogue? Within our conceptual framework, there is a fundamental principle you need to understand. When the frequency polarity is positive, all the recommendations, suggestions, and statements that arise under that condition will be, in essence, lies. Why? The reason is simple. A frequency with positive polarity will naturally and inevitably attract the negative polarity of the outcome. On the contrary, when the frequency polarity is negative, all the recommendations, suggestions, and statements that arise under that condition will be, in essence, truths. For the same principle. But in reverse, a frequency with negative polarity will naturally and inevitably attract the positive polarity of the outcome. Now that we can recognize the truthfulness of our inner dialogue, let's talk about stress and the Zoom effect. We have already seen how intentions, emotions, feelings, and behaviors generate frequencies with a specific polarity. But now I want to talk to you about something we all experience, and that can become the worst enemy of our outcomes: stress. It is a mental state that, when it sets in, generates an accumulation of frequencies with positive polarity. And that accumulation produces something deeply damaging, maximum magnetic force directed toward negative outcomes. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that stress blocks our access to the conscious state. It leaves us unconscious of our own unconscious. And when that happens, the inner dialogue takes complete control. Have you ever known exactly what you needed to do and done the opposite anyway? I want to share a real case, one that hits close to home, because it involves my daughter, Ana Isabel. She's at the University of Florida, preparing for the MCAT, the required exam to get into medical school in the United States. Over 7 hours of testing, 300 questions, and if she doesn't hit the score she needs, she loses everything. Her dream of becoming a doctor, years of studying, hundreds of hours of volunteer work, everything. The score ranges from 472 to 528. To get into the school she wants, she needs 510 points. She enrolled in a prep course, takes a practice exam every week, and hasn't been able to break 497. That's an enormous source of stress. So she sought help. She did her research, and she found her main problem: time management. What was happening? Whenever she hit a question she didn't know, she'd get stuck. 3 minutes, 4 minutes, trying to guess, and all that lost time added up. She'd reach question 240 or 250 and run out of time before finishing. She received a clear piece of advice. When you hit a question you don't know, skip it. Answer all the ones you do know first. Save the hard ones for the end. Simple, logical. She understood it perfectly. But what happened when she took the exam again? This is where everything clicks within our interpretive model. Ana Isabel was stressed, weeks without improvement. She knew what was at stake, and that stress generated a buildup of frequencies with positive polarity. She reached a hard question, and in that moment, the sabotage of the inner dialogue appeared. That voice that sounds exactly like you, that knows your insecurities, your fears, your desires, and precisely because of that, you believe it. Her inner dialogue told her, "You can handle this question. Try it. Don't skip it." Notice what just happened. She knew what the right strategy was. She had it down, but her inner dialogue convinced her to do the exact opposite. Why? Because the polarity of her dominant frequency was positive. And within our model, what happens when polarity is positive? Every recommendation from the inner dialogue is a lie. It told her, "You can handle this question," and it was a lie. It told her, "Don't skip it," and it was a lie. But she believed it, because that's how it works. The voice sounds just like you. It comes wrapped in apparent certainty, in false optimism, in a confidence that feels genuine. But those are deceptive feelings produced by the unconscious, when polarity is positive. And here another key phenomenon appears, the zoom effect. When the polarity of the dominant frequency is positive, our focus is magnetically drawn toward the negative outcome. What does this mean in Ana Isabel's case? When she got stuck on a hard question, her mind zoomed in. It amplified that question, made it the only thing that existed. It was as if she were holding a magnifying glass. That question grew enormous, and everything else vanished. The other 40 questions she could still answer correctly disappeared. The strategy she had learned faded into the background. The time slipping away stopped mattering. That's the zoom effect. The mind amplifies one outcome and shuts out all the alternatives. And this pattern repeated it wasn't just one question. Hard question, inner dialogue, you can do it. Zoom effect, she stays, loses time. Next hard question, same thing, again and again. She reached question 240 and ran out of time. The result? The same score, no improvement. And here I want you to understand something deeply. Ana Isabel failed because her inner dialogue, fueled by stress and operating under positive polarity, convinced her to act against what she knew was right. This case shows us three things. First, stress, a state that generates frequencies with positive polarity and blocks our access to conscious awareness. Second, the inner dialogue, when operating under positive polarity, is not your ally. It's a persuasion mechanism that steers you toward the negative outcome, using your own voice and feelings that seem real, but aren't. And third, the zoom effect works alongside the inner dialogue. While the voice says, "You can do it," your focus locks onto the wrong option, and all alternatives close off. Three forces working together. Stress generates the polarity, the inner dialogue persuades you, and the zoom effect shuts down your perspective. Now I want to ask you something. How many times has something like this happened to you? How many times did you know exactly what you needed to do, but something inside you convinced you to do the opposite? How many times did your inner dialogue say, "This is the one, trust it," and it turned out to be the wrong call? It's the polarity of your dominant frequency operating through your inner dialogue and the zoom effect. And the good news is that now that you know this, you can start to identify it. Because remember, the first step to changing the polarity is recognizing it. Let's continue with the third step. Watch how your mind operates. And here I want to ask something of you. Forget about Ana Isabel's case, because it's someone else's example. I want you to think about yourself, your current situation, whatever is keeping you worried and stressed. It could be a business that isn't taking off, a market that isn't responding, a relationship that is wearing thin, a goal that feels further and further away. And now in silence, listen to what your inner dialogue is telling you about that situation. What is it recommending? What is it suggesting? What is it asserting with absolute certainty? Ask yourself, is that situation generating stress for me? If the answer is yes, you already know what is happening. Stress is generating an accumulation of frequencies with positive polarity. And according to our model, that means everything your inner dialogue is recommending right now are lies. The zoom effect is also at work. Your mind is magnifying the problem and shrinking your alternatives. That is why it feels like there is no way out. But there is. The positive polarity just will not let you see it. This is the third step. Observe. Don't fight your mind. Simply observe the pattern. Because when you observe how your inner dialogue leads you astray, using lies disguised as certainty, you're never quite the same person again. Now let's move on to the fourth and final step. Go deeper. Good. Now you know something most people do not. You know that your inner dialogue lies to you when the polarity is positive. You know that stress is a trigger. You know that the zoom effect shuts down your perspective. But knowing the problem exists is not enough to solve it. It's like someone telling you there's a water leak in your house, but not giving you the tools to fix it. The leak is still there, and every day that passes, the damage grows. That's why I want to tell you about a resource I created specifically for those who are ready to move from understanding to action. It's my book, Internal Cause Number 1 That Blocks Abundance: Theory and Interpretive Model of the Polarity of the Frequency. There you will find the complete model, with factors explained in depth, with examples, with the conceptual framework that today we were only able to scratch the surface of. It is available right now on Amazon. It is a concise, direct book, designed for you to finish and apply with the intention of helping you live a better life. If you feel trapped in adversity, it can serve as a practical guide for making important decisions about your life project, your relationships, your businesses, financial markets, in short, anywhere your mind's influence is involved. So, if you are tired of repeating the same outcomes and want to break that cycle once and for all, this is the moment to take the next step. The question is, can you afford to keep letting your inner dialogue make decisions for you? I am deeply grateful for your presence. Thank you for trusting in this space. And remember, the first step toward changing the polarity is recognizing it. See you soon.